Good morning and welcome to our MVP coaching call. I'm Steve Porcaro with Bari Rubin and would like to welcome you to our last call of the month. We're going to jump right in and start our call for today. Very simply, we're going to use a little bit of an agenda to help us stay on track. We're going to talk about quick housekeeping tips, housekeeping. We'll do a quick intro for some of you who don't know us, just a 50,000, maybe even 100,000 foot overview of myself and Bari. I know we've met many of you online. Then we want to jump into your Q&As, or your Q&As. We'll take your questions. And then we have a couple tips for the holiday season. I know it's right around the corner, and one of the things that's really hard for people, so much activity, what can we do? And I'll share some things that I've learned out on the trail, so to speak. But our goal here is for you to leave with one or two ideas that you can implement to help you going forward in the next month or quarter. So let's jump right in. My name is Steve Porcaro, and before we do the introduction, quick housekeeping. On your screen, you should be able to see a toolbar. There's a little hand down there. You can raise your hand. There's a chat button. There's also a Q&A button. You can submit your question via the Q&A, and then Bari and I will get your question and answer it. If you'd like to speak, we have the ability to allow you to speak. I know some of you are driving, some of you are doing other things while you're listening, so we certainly understand. So that's the easiest way to do that. Also, if for some reason we get disconnected, the technology is not perfect, but it's pretty darn good, feel free to call right back in. If for some reason there's a breakdown with the system, we'll reach out to you via email in a few minutes and give you an alternate number. Knock on wood, we haven't had to do that yet, but anything's possible. And then also ongoing housekeeping tips. If you want to continue this call afterwards, if you have some other questions where you're like a little bit more input, Bari and I are available to answer your questions offline. We're trying to get these recordings posted. We share them on LinkedIn. If you'd like to receive the recording by email, just drop me a note and we'll send that out to you. Bari, did I forget any other housekeeping tips?
Nope, I think we're good.
All right, thank you. Great job. All right, so we'll go right into the introductions. And again, my name is Steve Porcaro. I've met many of you online in our groups on LinkedIn. And one of the things I just wanted to share is that we've been running these groups for about 10 years now, coming up on 11. Time flies when you're having fun. And a lot of the information that we're sharing with you about using social media, transitioning, growing your business, hiring people for your team, between Bari and I, we've been out in the field. Our careers are spent in the sales field with team development, organizational business development. So between, again, Bari and I and everyone else on the call, our goal here is to share whatever knowledge, wisdom, insight, experience we can with each other. As much as people like to say they know it all, I don't know anyone who does. I certainly don't know it all, but ideally, we all have enough of a unique background that allows us to share some of that commonality and best practices, so to speak. So my experience in a nutshell, for those of you on the phone, I spent 5 years working in the operating room in the Navy. I was a surgical technologist. I was able to work in sterile supply. I was able to work in an outpatient surgery clinic. I was able to do first assist. Being in the military setting, you get a good hands-on experience. After leaving the military, I was recruited by an orthopedic trauma company called Synthase. It's now DePuy Synthase. I spent about 12 and a half years doing orthopedic trauma. And then after my children were born, I decided I needed a little bit more stable lifestyle. Being on call for 12 and a half years was great, but was also taking a toll on my family life. And I was fortunate enough to switch over to work for another good company, Arthrex, in the sports medicine field, and it allowed me to have more of an elective surgical schedule. And I was there for about 5 years. And during that time, I was looking to start my own small distributorship. I partnered up with a friend of mine. We brought some specialty technology to the market. I worked for another friend selling total joints for Arthrex, Exact Tech. And so I did some total joints, DME, biologics. I mean, basically everything from the neck down when it came to orthopedics. And then back in 2005, I thought I'd take everything I learned and leverage my background and experience and bring it over to a coaching, consulting, training organization. And that's where I've been for the last coming up on 15 years. And it allows me to not only help my clients, but also help people outside the medical device industry. So it's been a pretty good run. And working with Bari, we've been able to take our combined experiences and share that with people in our groups and on the call. So at this point, Bari, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can do a quick introduction. Well, let me flip that over. There you go. There's Bari live. Take it away.
Well, Steve's experience is in the military and in hospitals and with larger companies, and I am at the opposite end of the spectrum. When I was living in Los Angeles, I reinvented myself. I'm one of those people who was fortunate enough to be successful in changing careers. I started out in cosmetics and aesthetics and thought that plastic surgery would be a great alternative universe. And unknowingly, when I applied for a job, it happened to be an ophthalmic surgeon. So I ended up in ophthalmology private practice. And from there, I was recruited by a small ophthalmology startup. And so my experience has been on the practice side with startups doing practice development, implementation, and disposable sales. And now I'm in Florida. So I think between the two of us, Steve and I cover, both ends and everything in between.
Okay, thank you, Bari. Yep, so the idea here is we started doing this Q&A because people would join the LinkedIn groups and there was a lot of common questions, and we thought if we could get everyone together on a call or at least share some of the common questions, that would be a great way to be able to share our experience and what we've learned over the last 10 years in the groups. And Bari and I met via LinkedIn 10 years ago, doing our own thing, and our paths cross. So it really is an interesting experience. We can share and say, yeah, social media works because we see it happen all the time. But one of the things we wanted to do, again, the holiday season's coming up. This is the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. I wanted to take a few minutes and talk a little bit about where social media is going. This is something that's been constant. We keep hearing about the evolution of social media. And one of the things that's happening, as you know, people are getting either saturated with social media, or people are saying, you know what, it's really helpful in my career, in my business, and I really want to spend more time learning how to use this. But the question is, what's the best social media for me? And that's a loaded question. And Bari and I, we've done presentations on LinkedIn and using social media for your business. And we'll be doing one coming up at the beginning of the year to help people who are new to LinkedIn. But we found this great graphic out there that from a, again, 50,000-foot view, it's a little bit of a satire, but it really explains when you think about social media. If you look at the most popular, the most commonly used social media platforms, what's working for some people, what's working for other people. And the funny thing is, it's like anything that we use in our business, right? We have to have the right tool for the right job. And again, going forward, Twitter, this is a very limited social blogging program, right? Basically, it used to have 140 characters. Now it's up to 280, but it's just making a comment, right? I have time, I'm eating a donut. And I think about over all these years, I would go into the operating room. I would stop and get donuts for a while. That was the big joke, you know, how many donuts, how many muffins am I bringing for this in-service? So it is funny. I have given up donuts for a while, but I still miss them on occasionally. The other thing is we talk about business versus personal use. LinkedIn may be the biggest user professionally, but Facebook is one of the biggest platforms people are using for their personal use. And you'll see things like, I like donuts, I like certain foods in there. You don't see people posting pictures of their meals on LinkedIn, but you may see it on Facebook. So it is pretty funny. The other one is Foursquare is something, I don't use it much. Barry, do you use Foursquare much? Have you seen it?
I've seen it, and I actually have friends who use it, but to me, it doesn't really give you any information unless people never know where you are. It's like a geolocation, you know, I'm here doing this, and then there's another one called Swarm, which is very similar to Foursquare. And to me, it just, you know, I don't want people to know where I am all the time.
Well, that's because we're, you know, people of a certain age, right? But the young people, I know when they're out and about, they use that technology. And again, it's something that this was, I don't want to say social media for adults or professionals. Snapchat's not on there. There are other kids that other programs that my kids are using, but Instagram, very focused on photography and a lot of pictures. So there are people who will, my wife is an artist, is a great example. She can take a lot of her work and share it socially. And the nice thing is for some people, they can use 1, 2, 3, or all of these at the same time concurrently. Most of us aren't going to do that. I think if our clients, our colleagues, our industry or market is in a certain place, we're probably going to use one or the other. YouTube, it's kind of funny. YouTube's taking off in a sense because we're driven to video, right? We see a lot of companies doing streaming now. A lot of people are cutting the cord for cable, and what they do is they'll go to YouTube or their streaming service. They get to watch what they want when they want it. So the nice thing is when you're putting up educational material and programmings, people can go to YouTube. People can make educational videos, informative news, all types of videos. There are times when I have some great playlists on YouTube just because of the music. So again, depending the type of work that you're doing, YouTube is a great medium. As a matter of fact, we just helped a client make a video for a product, and it was a great little project for us to go out there, but it's a great way for us to demonstrate how to use that product. And I know, again, in the medical device field, we use a lot of custom animation. We use some video recording, but now everybody can use it. Now, LinkedIn, for many of us, we're here because we were on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great place for professionals to go to. It's a great place for people who are transitioning, and it's still evolving. There are things going on LinkedIn. Microsoft purchased LinkedIn a couple years ago. I think it's coming up on 3 years now, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe even a little bit longer. But the technology is evolving, and what you can do with it is evolving as well. So we're going to have a separate LinkedIn presentation coming up if you'd like to be part of that. Pinterest is another program where people are posting a lot of ideas. They share a lot of information in an infographic format. Again, it's a great way to share information in an easy to read format. Depending on what you're selling or the service, it's a great way for you to build collections of information and share it with groups of people. But I think it's very interesting to figure out how you want to figure that out. Barry, you have any thoughts on any of these so far?
Yes, actually, I just wanted to make an observation related to social media, that everything is always evolving. And even the way that we perceive or how we knew certain social media apps or platforms worked, they've started changing. For example, on Instagram now, even though it's always been more visually based, it was purchased by Facebook because they saw the power of pictures. And now a lot of brands will put up photos with links where if you click on it, it takes you directly to the store. So a lot of these platforms that started out as truly social, they finally have been getting the pulse of society and figuring out how to monetize them. So now you can shop on Instagram. Another example is now that YouTube, because Google bought YouTube, they're making Google Music go away and creating YouTube Music. And with Pinterest, again, that's another one where you can now shop right within the app. And the interesting changes that Microsoft has been making with LinkedIn are related to the way that people use their phones and their desktops. For example, a lot of people don't know that if you're on your phone, when you're using LinkedIn in the messenger system, you can actually send people a 59-second voice message or a video. And that is a huge, huge departure from the way that we used to use LinkedIn, because they're trying to make it more personal, more real life, more interactive. And Twitter's switch from being only brief characters shows how much more technology has changed. It was originally created so that a tweet would only be the length of a text message. And now it's that larger 280 characters, and it gives people more room to talk. So it's less ephemeral and more informative. So everything is evolving as these companies watch the way we interact with social media. And it's fascinating because some of these changes happen so quickly, you blink and you'll miss it. And they've all become multifunctional and much more ubiquitous, I think.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point, Barry, and thank you. It's interesting when you talk about evolution. The last one on the list, or the second to last one, the Last FM, is a streaming service for music. It's used overseas a lot. One of the things that you see happening with social media here in the US, but really around the world, there's a lot of overlap. The market was being carved out into segments, but to Barry's point, there's a lot of things now that are crossing over, and everyone's trying to grab onto that market share, which brings us to the last one, Google Plus. It used to be out there for people to, another way for Google to capture information, another value-added service. But as Barry mentioned a little while ago, Google Plus was retired earlier this year, and it was very interesting. They were never able to capture the momentum. So Google is known, just like Microsoft and just like Amazon, a lot of these companies, if they can't compete with you, they can buy competing technology and implement it, merge it, integrate it into their existing system. At the end of the day, it's an ongoing process, and we think about, again, holidays are coming up, right? You think about traditions that you had. Thanksgiving. What did you watch for movies? What did you do? Think about the VHS tapes or the the laser disc and the DVDs, and now we're streaming now. So I think Google Plus is just another example of things processing. I don't know where it's going to stop. All we know is that it's constantly moving. So Barry, any thought before we wrap it up and go on to our Q&A session on social media?
Actually, I just wanted to point out that everything these days is being socialized, for lack of a better word. We were talking about YouTube, and I mentioned how YouTube launched music because Google Music went away. But the other thing has happened is that Spotify, which used to be a music streaming platform, has now become a social media platform, and there's a way to share your playlists. So everything that technology has been expanding on has all been about ways to keep people connected. Some people connect through music, some people connect through conversation, some people connect through professional affinities, some people connect through groups of friends. Every technology, every platform is built around bringing people together. And it's a double-edged sword, but I like to look at the positive side and see that there are ways for all of us to connect with methods that are meaningful to each of us.
All right, thank you, Barry. So with that being said, again, this is the Tuesday before the holidays. We have a couple of questions that were submitted, and they're really regarding the holidays. There's a couple questions that we could almost call it holiday survival tips, right, going forward, business/personal. And for some people, Thanksgiving is the kickoff. For many people, it's the kickoff of the holiday season. Between Thanksgiving and New Year's, either you're closing up the year-end business or you're getting ready to launch into 2020. But one of the things that comes up is, how do I survive the holiday? What can I do? I'm entertaining with clients. I'm entertaining with my family. It's the end of the year. I got to put things together. So a couple things I just want to share with you. And again, this is something that it's a moving target. These tips aren't for everybody, but these are things I've learned personally as well as professionally. And Barry and I are going to share a couple things to jump in there. But one of the things I wanted to share was really setting expectations. If you think about what's realistic from an end of year perspective, from a business perspective, I always had goals to hit every month, right? What do I need to do to close business? Sometimes you can go in there and shake the tree. Sometimes you can get things closing. I tried to be really focused and realistic on what type of business I could close. I didn't want to upset people, but I also knew that if I didn't push, people get distracted with the holidays when it came to closing business, getting the year-end proposals in. Many organizations may have money, budgets that they need to spend at the end of the year, so this would be a perfect time if they have a calendar year. On the personal side, here's the part that on one hand, we're like, okay, I'm here, I'm ready for the holidays. What do I need to be concerned about? So realistic expectations. People are going, what can you afford to spend in terms of time and money when it comes to gift giving, entertaining, right? I think setting realistic budgets. Same thing professionally. Are you buying gifts for clients? Are you entertaining? What's realistic? From a health perspective, and this is something near and dear, right? Again, we talk about at a certain point in our life, I could eat donuts in the past all the time, or maybe I could eat them and I just didn't realize the effect. But going forward, many of us have a tendency to overindulge food and drink. And part of that is you know what, we take a break, we let our hair down. That's an inside joke for some of you, but we let our hair down and we want to know what our limits are, because the funny thing is January 2nd, we're back to square one. So even though we may be enjoying the holiday, we want to make sure we can stay focused. The other thing that's kind of funny, and this happens too, the big joke is getting together for Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, Hanukkah, other holidays that come up. What are some of the topics that you can speak about, and some of the topics you can't? And the joke in my family and my wife's family was, we had politics, religion, other things that we would talk about. Sports is a big thing, right? So on one hand, there are topics that are freely open and you can discuss, and other things that you couldn't. So let's talk a minute about unrealistic expectation. This coming Friday is Black Friday, and for weeks now, we've been hearing about going out there and getting sales. Sometimes it's really hard because we want to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak, whether it's family or, again, in our business, right? What are other companies, what are other organizations doing? That might be slightly unrealistic. I know that it happens sometimes. We buy into that media hype, but we want to make sure that it's not really directing the things that we're trying to do. The other thing that's interesting, how many people, and I'm just as guilty, and I know many people, we try to do it when we get our families together. We may try to solve some conflicts that are going on. Sometimes the holidays may not be the place to do that. I also know from a business perspective, when we talk about trying to close some business or resolve issues, sometimes over the holidays, it's going to be a challenge to do that. And then the last one, and it is kind of silly, but anyone out there looking for the perfect gift, the perfect table setting, the perfect decoration, the perfect year-end fill in the blank? I think sometimes looking and going to that extreme, it's really hard sometimes to find that perfect gift or that perfect idea. So sometimes I think keeping in the middle of the road, being realistic, is probably the best way to go. Barry, any thoughts, anything you want to add when it comes to expectations, things that you've run into?
I once saw a quote that was so meaningful to me that I made it the wallpaper on my smartphone. And that quote was, "Strive for progress, not perfection." You could drive yourself crazy trying to find the perfect gift, plan the perfect meal, make the perfect dessert. First of all, there is no such thing as perfect. So when you're striving for perfection, you're automatically setting yourself up for failure. Sometimes good enough is great. That's my only comment.
No, that's great, and thank you, Barry. So the other, and again, this is the end of year. This is a little bit more of a work-life balance question that came in, and the interesting thing is, you join a new organization, and every company has their own traditions and customs, culture. Some people are spending time with new spouses. They're recently married, or they're in a new relationship. When it comes to traditions, sometimes we have to think about what's a new tradition, what's the meaning, the purpose of this holiday. And it is easy sometimes to forget. And again, Barry and I were talking recently about, with everything going on at the end of the year, work-wise, home-wise, we have to take time to slow down. Barry's in Florida, I'm in Connecticut. So part of this challenge is we're communicating with our network personally and professionally. How do we make sure that we remember what the meaning of the holidays are? I think sometimes it's easy. Again, my children have grown up a certain way. Other people, other families do things differently. The interesting thing is, this goes back to what works for you. And when we talk about traditions and customs, I think, and Barry brought up a good point, our goal is progress, not perfection. I love the idea of keeping the traditions and customs that work for you and your family, but also, more importantly, being open to new ones. So this year, on a personal note, my wife and I, we're going to be empty nesters the first time for the holiday. And it's interesting because, yes, we may have some children home for the holiday, but we're also looking at starting some new traditions, thinking, wow, we get a chance to do things, by ourselves, maybe with our children, maybe not. So we want to be open to new traditions, but also keep the ones that worked for us. The other thing that's very interesting is some of us, and I think a lot of people, we talk about this, when you're in sales and you're in business and you're involved in the community, giving back is something that many of us do on an ongoing basis. And I think the end of the year is, to me anyway, and I know many people here, and I know some of you do a lot throughout the year, this is also a good reminder of to give back to the community. And I think sometimes when we do charity work, sometimes that's the best gift we can give to others. Sometimes we talk about it's better to give than it is to receive. And I know sometimes I feel like this is a perfect time of year going forward. But when it comes to traditions, Barry, anything that you enjoy doing over the holidays or things that have worked for you?
I think for me, I've always ended up having to drive places on the holidays and not so much flying to my destination. And I take a deep breath, make sure that I've got my favorite Pandora station or my favorite CDs in the changer, and just go with the flow and leave extra time. Plan ahead so that I don't stress myself out. It is so easy to get stressed out for the holidays. And, there's nothing worse than getting to the people's house that invited you for dinner and realizing you forgot the wine, you forgot the dessert, you put on socks that don't match. Just, take a deep breath, take a minute, and try to stay centered, because spinning out of control is difficult and counterproductive and very easy to do when you've got family surrounding you, because as the saying goes, your family will push your buttons because they know where they are. They are the ones that installed them.
Well, that's a good point, Barry. So, all right. So the last question / tip is planning your calendar, your schedule for the holiday season. As I mentioned earlier, really starting this week to January 1st or 2nd, and sometimes even after. I know many organizations may have a holiday get together after the first of the year just because of accommodations. Sometimes creating a special holiday calendar, again, with your spouse, with your children, with your colleagues, work commitments, friends. If you start thinking about all the things you could be doing, it can be overwhelming. I'm a firm believer, and it works for me, getting everything out either on paper or on a calendar, so we're all looking at it, right? Everyone who's involved, it's a great place to do that. You want to write down every activity and know, what time does it start? What time does it end? Where is it? Do I need to leave work early? Do I need to go to work early? Again, there are things in the community I'm involved with, things at home, things at work, and we have to figure out how to do all of that. Part of the scheduling and the calendar process is communication, right? We've been talking about communication for years, but I think it's helpful. Sometimes I know in the rush, I think I said something, I thought I sent an email. 90% of the time, I'll take the blame for it. I miscommunicated or I misunderstood. So that's part of this process when we come to scheduling. One of the things that I think it's important, especially if you're traveling, to Barry's point, for years, I lived in Connecticut, but my family and my wife's family is in Massachusetts. So we'd spend the holidays on the Massachusetts Turnpike, would be driving in weather, would be going up there because it was easier for us to go up there over the years when the kids were small. But what we tried to do was balance, right? Spend time with both sides of our family, and it's managed to work out fairly equitable. The other thing that we're doing now, as I mentioned earlier, making sure we spend time with our adult friends as well as our children only type activities, right? So again, my children are grown now, but in the past, we wanted to make sure that if my wife and I wanted to go out and have that adult social time, we had that, i.e. date night. If I was lucky, I could pull a twofer, right? I could take it to a work-related function and call it a date night, but it was kind of funny. And then the other thing is planning something to recover from the holiday. Some people call it the holiday blues. I just feel like sometimes we're so busy with the holiday. We may be entertaining, we may be traveling, we may be celebrating, we may be visiting family. All the holidays are exhausting. Um, I try to think about anyone I know recently who's when they say I've had a restful, relaxing holiday. I don't hear that. Granted, most of the people I'm interacting with have children and family or traveling. Some point in my life, I'll have a relaxing holiday, but if you can, try to schedule some time after the holidays to recover, relax, recharge your batteries, right? I don't want to say get over the holiday blues as much as I need to have you recharge because 2020 is right around the corner and you want to get ready to jump in and start hitting your goals and planning for success going forward. So Barry, any tips from a scheduling calendar view that have worked well for you?
To think about that for a minute.
All right. While Barry's thinking about that, quick reminder, starting next week on the 3rd, our call will be moving to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Our goal here is based on feedback is to allow people to participate more during lunch and to allow people to who are in other time zones to have it closer towards midday. I think that's it for the moment. I think in terms of tips, we're at the end of our time. I want to thank you for participating. Barry, any final thoughts before we sign off for the holiday?
Oh, I just wanted to wish everybody a Thanksgiving and remember to be grateful for all of your social media connections. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week at a different time.
All right. Have a great Thanksgiving, everyone. Bye-bye.